Public comment on the draft National State Enterprises Bill has come to an end this weekend. It seeks to replace the Public Enterprises Department with a new state-owned holding company to oversee state-owned entities. There's, of course, been a mixed reaction to the idea. Well, let's unpack it further with strategist and economist Miriam Altman. Miriam, good evening to you. Thanks for your time. Firstly, let's just talk about this proposal that's on the table, right? The National State Enterprises Bill, that's what's been open for public comment. But really, as I've just said, its aim is to try and see if all of these state-owned entities can exist under one entity. They already kind of do that under the Public Enterprises Ministry. So what would really be different about bringing them into this entity? What role do you see it playing?
So, Kathy, what it's meant to deal with, and thanks for having me, the reality is that the state-owned entities are fragmented under a lot of different roofs. There are some that fall under the Department of Public Enterprise, or DPE, which is maybe what you're thinking about. But equally, there are many that fall under provinces, other departments, anyway. They're actually quite fragmented, and I think they're worried that some of the regulations are fragmented and that they're not getting to the right governance. So hence, there was this proposal to house them under one holding company or holdco. This particular legislation, to be honest, is a little unclear as to which ones will go there, quite frankly, and I'm not sure that they do intend, in fact, to take all of them under this umbrella, because it doesn't say.
Does it solve the problem here that we're facing, which is really entities that have received an enormous amount of funding? I think if we look at just some of the figures that were read out to Parliament earlier this year, in excess of 300 billion that has been given to state-owned entities just in the form of bailouts over the last decade, but certainly sort of the reward for that or the output for that has not matched the investment. Does it deal with that problem?
So when I think about this, and that's just me, but if one is doing a major intervention at this point, and we definitely need major institutional interventions. We are not getting the performance we need, and to your point, it's not so much that the money is going in, but that the service isn't coming out the way that it needs to. And we have a governance issue, we have a performance issue, and if one is going to be instituting a major institutional intervention, one should be focusing on the biggest infrastructure SOEs that are currently monopolies in their area. So as an example, Eskom, PRASA, and Transnet as examples. We should be seeing market reform, more competition in those areas, a tightening up of what those SOEs do, a stabilization and improvement of quality in the boards of each of those entities, a stabilization and improvement in quality in the executive management of those entities, a separation of politics from the operation of those entities. Anything that is done at the moment, given the seriousness in the shortfall of services in these key areas that are now drawing the economy down, those issues should be the focus, and that's not really what this bill has in it. It may have been the intention, but it's not in there yet.
Miriam, when we look again at just part of what is contained in the language around this bill, it of course also speaks about the role of the shareholder, which in this instance would be the government. The state would be the only shareholder. And that of course raises questions around how then does this translate into efficiencies. One of the big concerns that comes about around state-owned enterprises is also that of interference, right, and in particular political interference. And one would think that any reform that is to be affected should also deal with the question of political interference. Does this do that? Because again, there've been promises out of some officials, including in the Department of Public Enterprises, that have said, look, the idea will be to employ the best of the best. But can that truly happen?
Yeah. So I think one of the core ideas of having the holdco is to separate the politics from the administration of these entities. I think that's one of the core ideas, because one's being challenged by the very deep patronage that's happening, not just in SOEs, but across the board in local government, et cetera. Now, the challenge with this particular bill and the way that it's articulated so far, and it's out for public comment, to be fair, so we'll see what comments come in and how it's altered. But in this current version of the bill, what it says is that the president is the main representative, and the president may delegate that function to another cabinet member, which is essentially what happens now, to the Minister of Public Enterprises. And it is the president who appoints the board of the holdco, and in turn the holding company board appoints the boards of the entities that fall within it. Now, the challenge is that you are still sitting with that political problem, which is that if we're not seeing the separation of politics from the appointment of boards and the high quality appointment of boards, then this particular articulation of the bill won't solve that problem. What could solve that problem potentially, and I also put in comments, what could potentially solve it is if there were an independent body, assuming you want the holdco, but if you do have it, and that's one problem you want to solve, then you might want to do it the way that we appoint the judiciary, where you have an independent committee. It may even be the SOE council, as it is right now. People like Sipon Kosi and others who are there, that an independent respected body may be, or even ad hoc committee might appoint the board. But insofar as you still have the president and a minister, you're basically back where you started, is the issue. Then the second issue that arises, if I may just say, and you're quite right, part of the problem is that unless you have a market restructure where you have competition in these markets instituted, and or competition that the holdco is facing competition with some other entity. There are holding companies, but they compete with other companies to be successful, and that institutes performance. And or if you have strong regulation, which we don't right now, but if you had strong regulators then in each of these sectors, then that could also help. But unfortunately, regulation is weak. So there really needs to be a context that enables these performance improvements in the first place.
Miriam, you spoke about just how fragmented things are when it comes to the state-owned enterprises, and how you see that sort of from national right down to what's happening in the provinces. Do you think that a bill like this helps to streamline those entities? And realistically, how long is it going to take? I mean, as things stand, they seem to also be contesting views about how many SOEs we actually have in this country. So how do we fix a problem that even, the government itself does not fully understand?
Look, in many cases, SOEs belong with municipalities or provinces or in other places. That's number one. Number two, it's a very good question as to which SOEs should actually continue existing, is a very good question. But the most important thing right now is not those questions. The most important questions right now, given the state of the economy, is to get the major SOEs that are as I've said, the major SOEs that are monopolies in their sectors that are really holding the country up. Again, Eskom, Transnet, PRASA, those kinds of SOEs, the big infrastructure SOEs that are monopolies in their service areas and not delivering the service as they need to. Though that's really where our attention should be. And should we focus our attention on a holding company? Personally, I don't think so. When I was a commissioner I'm not saying you shouldn't have a holding company, but it isn't what I would be doing right now. What I would be doing right now is implementing changes that enable performance improvements. I'll just give you one example. There's a lot of talk about the application of the PFMA, and I know, I used to work at telecom. We were continuously getting exemptions from the PFMA. It's almost impossible to run an entity like this if you fall under the PFMA and do the major kind of procurement you need to do. Maybe we need special legislation for procurement in relation to these state-owned entities. But this particular bill, as it's written now, doesn't solve that problem because it refers to these falling under the Companies Act and under the PFMA. So it doesn't solve that problem. So they'll still fall. These pieces of legislation will still apply. So the issue is that I would be honing straight in to where these inefficiencies are, the performance overview, the introduction of competition as we're doing now in ESCOM, clarity around what these SOEs should look like going forward, which is probably slimmed down and more strategic in their orientation.
All right.
The financial models that this bill won't solve, and certainly the governance, ensuring that there's the appropriate appointment, and particularly in these very important entities.
All right. Strategist and economist Miriam Altman. We'll leave it there for tonight. Thanks for your time.